Nachi here. Thanks for joining us today. I'm part of their AI platform solutions team. So we build, as a central hub, everything for PepsiCo. Quickly about PepsiCo, if you didn't know already, it's a large company, $92 billion. $1 billion impressions every day. That means that 1 billion people buying our products across the globe. And then, of course, plenty of data, as you can imagine. So I can keep talking about how much we do, but we'll talk a lot more in this session. So, Shobit.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shobit Varshney. I head data and AI for IBM Consulting. It's a pretty large organization, as you would imagine. Out of 160,000 people, the Gen AI book of business has crossed 6 billion. So it's been scaling up quite heavily. I cut across all industries, and I do this in the US, Canada, Latin America. We have been partnering with Pepsi and other clients in scaling AI across. So today we'll get deeper into how we're bringing AI to life at the scale of Pepsi.
All right, so as you can imagine, this is a value chain between buy, make, move, sell. And across, you'll see a lot of AI being used today. And we'll talk about a few of these examples in a little bit more detail later on. But for example, you think of supply chain, precision agriculture. You wouldn't think of a lot of AI today. But in agriculture, for example, we are doing a lot of soil testing. So there's a lot of usage of how we are able to do that soil testing today using drone images and so on. But plus also, how can you connect a grower to an agronomist who can help them get the best yield out of the crops? Things like that you wouldn't necessarily imagine where AI would be applied is things that we're trying to do in PepsiCo. So we'll talk a lot more about what we're doing on the consumer and the commercial side, but just wanted to give you a couple of examples of what's happening on the other spaces as well.
I'm generally impressed that Pepsi is really a data and AI company that happens to make some amazing products. We do, cutting across these, I'm generally impressed with the scale at which the data comes in. 60 petabytes doubling every year is a lot to deal with, and then you add all the IoT data on top. Let's start with the very first one around consumer engagement. And you mentioned before, Pepsi delivers 1.4 billion smiles every day. And one of the things that we wanted to do was how do you scale sales and one-on-one marketing campaigns direct to the consumer? So we'll run a quick video to show you what Pepsi has done around Gatorade bottle. And Gatorade brand stands for athletes. Each one of us has an athlete within us. So how do you personalize the product to each individual nephew, niece when you go to a party with them? So let's play this video.
Awesome. So this was an idea that really came about close to late last year. And we said, OK, what do we want to do to hyper-personalize each bottle for every athlete or everyone who wants to use Gatorade? And this is something that you can do today. Go to Gatorade.com, type in your idea, and get a bottle that's of your design. Now, there was immense engineering that had to go behind to make sure that the image that's generated is safe, reliable, and it's going through. But since that's happened, what we see is a huge uptake in our sales. And you'll see the number of bottle designs that have been generated since then. And this is just in the last 6 months. And this is the kind of usage that you wouldn't necessarily think, but for us, as we're trying to drive more consumer engagement, becomes super important. And we'll only see more of such examples being deployed.
It's a really good example of AI being used to drive loyalty and sales versus most of the use cases in enterprises are still focused on productivity.
Correct.
And I think this tees us up really well to talk about observability because it is such a big risk that we're taking when you're exposing something to the end consumers at the scale of Pepsi. You can imagine if somebody wants to be cute and create an image of somebody holding a competitor's product on it or something that may not be suitable. So there's a very high bar of what you do to ensure that your brand guidelines are still followed through.
Absolutely.
So I think that sets up us very well to introduce how Pepsi as a company has set up the various different portfolio of capabilities, and we'll get deeper into more observability.
Absolutely. So if you broadly think of what we have set up here is trying to replicate human intelligence, if you had to say, okay, I have to have memory, attention, through which I'll build skills and through which we'll do problem solving, it's this layer of skills, we call them AS platforms that we've really got, that's enabling it. Now, you look at linguistic, we've got Pepsi conversational intelligence, then we've got vision capabilities, IoTs, reasoning, and then we'll talk a little bit more about PepVigil, which is our observability, right? And really clicking down on how observability has to be enabled across all of these layers and not just one of them. A lot of times when we talk of LLM evals, it's great, it's for the generative AI side, but evals has to be across everything, across all applications of AI within the company. So how do we do that? And it's really a connected tissue across.
And very, very agnostic of the technology stack, right? I think that's one thing that has been one of the principles of Pepsi has been, I want to make sure that we can go where the puck is going, be able to swap things in and out as needed. So it's you guys have done a really good job at ensuring the flexibility so that you can be very, very agile going forward. Let's go a little bit deeper into Pep Gen X. Within PepsiCo globally, enterprise-wide, there's just a ton of generative AI use cases, 100 plus, that you want to go work on. And there's a variety of different teams that want to work on this, right? So you would imagine federated innovation across the organization globally. So marketing may want to go do something like what we just showed. There could be R&D, they could be working on some other documents and so on and so forth. So this whole concept of how do you abstract out intelligence that can be deployed as a service so that you can centralize the assets and then you can federate the innovation that happens all over the enterprise. That gives us an opportunity to centralize all the observability and all the evals, all the filtering and so on and so forth, right? It also gives us an unfair advantage that we can go swap things out in and out very quickly. So if you imagine if, say, marketing team starts to go build their own app with a small third-party SaaS vendor, we have zero insights into how they're using that. And at some point, if they do want to switch the model from one model to another, that's going to take a while. So the timeline that Nachi was talking about, you come up with an idea, you want to go to market in a few weeks, you don't want to miss the Thanksgiving and the Christmas peak. That cannot happen if you're going at it yourself, right? So this whole concept of having a centralized platform, we've been partnering with Pepsi to build this agnostic platform where you can swap LLMs in and out with all the different layers. And now that's been extended out to do more agent factory as well. PepVigil is how we're observing everything, and that's baked into anything that leverages Pep Gen X. Do you want to touch on that, and we'll go deeper into PepVigil?
Absolutely. I think, and you brought up the right concept here, is we call it the abstraction, because it's really not one technology versus the other. It's being this abstraction layer. So for the end solution, it's an API call. They don't need to have to worry about what's it on the back end, and I think partnering with IBM on that piece was great. What he mentioned about PepVigil being integrated is super key, because then any solution that uses our PepGenX platform is automatically getting observed through our PepVigil platform. So that integration is key. And I think we can go into the details a little bit more of when we look at PepVigil, it's really, you look at all the data sources below. It's PepGenX is just one of the sources, but you also see all the other platforms and things that we called out earlier on the slide of being inputs into this. So it's not only looking at everything that we're doing on our generative AI platform, which is PepGenX, but also looking at our conversational AI platforms, our vision platforms, and our image recognition platforms. So all of those are embedded or connected to PepVigil, and that becomes our central hub for looking across observability for across AI. And then, by the way, PepVigil is also queued into our responsible AI framework, and that's something we'll talk about later on. But then this becomes a whole closed loop pieces about we build AI, but you're able to observe and be able to connect it back to the policies that the company is making around responsible AI as well.
And this is where Arise steps in. All of the observability platform, we're trying to create a central place where you can observe all these different data sets right at the bottom. So whether it's computer vision models or it's forecasting and so on and so forth. So let's get a little bit deeper into setting up what the problem is. I'm going to pick one of the many use cases. In CPG, in consumer goods and retail, there's a concept of planogram, which is saying that an end seller has to go and stack and rank all these different items. So chips and drinks and so on and so forth. And there's a particular method to the madness on how do you stack those up that drives incentive to buy and so on and so forth, right? So you may have the bigger items, 2-liter bottles on the top. You may have something more approachable and small at the kids level that has more of the Fanta and so on and so forth, right? So you would imagine somebody's walking into the retail store and you're stacking ranking these. I want to be able to deliver adherence to the planogram. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing some examples of how either chips or drinks are stacked in. And then you start to do things around taking a picture of the shelf itself. And now you can obviously count the things, but you can also see, are they adhering to the planogram? And then you start to see the incentives that are driven for the sellers are based on what's the stock outage, how many did they rank correctly, what was the count. All of that intelligence has to come in from the images itself. So Pepsi has been on this journey of creating mobile activated AI at the edge. A lot of these are edge devices and AI has to run on the phone. In certain cases, it could run on the cloud. But that's the planogram use case. But in the real world, left-hand side is what you start training on. Right-hand side is what you start running into when people are using this in the field. So the three examples here, one of them has a bright light on one side. The middle one is excessively dark on the top shelf. And the third one is somebody's hand is in the middle. So all of these are what we run into. Now, the data science team that's building these models and training them has to get some notifications with the proper set of clusters and being able to predict the labels on top of it and send it back for retraining, right? Anything you would add?
Yeah, no, I think this becomes key because this drives sort of the business in the front line side. And if they don't get these right, then their incentives are impacted, as Shobit was saying. So it's super critical for us to get this right. And also, it gets us the right KPIs. Before we did this, it was all hand-taken surveys. Imagine a person walking with a piece of paper and trying to take this and saying, yes, I'm actually placing these products right. I've done this all correct. No way for us to say this was actually done or not. So this one image can help us. Now, to be able to do this real time across all of the millions of images being taken across. By the way, this is not just in one market or anything else. This is a global solution that every sales rep in every market goes and uses. So we're talking of millions of images. Today, we are processing more than 10 million images. Tomorrow, it's going to be much, much more as we get penetrated into all the markets. But doing that at scale, getting it back to the teams and be able to observe it is a key part.
Now, I think the scale of this is crazy. 10 million plus images to be processed and be able to label it correctly. And then there's these regional nuances between the images itself. There's just the label behind it will have a green dot in one market, a red dot in another one. So the amount of images to be processed here are quite insane. So this is how we have been leveraging Arise and the partnership with them. On the left-hand side, you're seeing some images which are good and some are drifting. The screenshot here shows you the blue cluster are images that are outside of what the training data was, and the purple is what it should be like. So very quickly, we need somebody to be able to go and zoom in and say, hey, this cluster looks funky. And the question is, when you're looking at images, I cannot pre-train a classifier because I can't label enough bad images. So we needed a mechanism where I can create an embedding, take an image, convert it into an embedding, and images that are similar will end up in the same embedding space.
Yeah, and I think this has really helped us. This is where the partnership with Arise also comes in, is we've been now able to see it on a scatter plot that now can distinguish between saying, hey, these are the data sets I need to go take a closer look at, and gets us to finding out the issues that are the outliers that I need to, one, exclude from my future training set, but also gets us to why is it failing, why is the accuracy dipping in certain places. And this also, of course, helps us set up triggers and so on and so forth. So automated pipelines for training and such. So this is really helping us in multiple markets, but this is only going to scale in the future.
This next one is around quality assurance during production. So the big spots that you're seeing are actually potatoes. I've spent so much time now staring at these potatoes. And the challenge is it's coming down a conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt is nice and shiny. We have cameras that take pictures of it and tell you if it has been perfectly peeled to be ready for making chips, right? Now the challenge here is you may have an old potato that left a starch mark, or in all our infinite wisdom, we made this nice and shiny, so it looks like there are two potatoes coming down the pipe. There's only one. So there are a lot of real-world challenges that we run into with this. Again, here, Arise helps us with some of the image segmentation processes. Another example is just old-school, good machine learning models. In this case, it's for forecasting. And given all the models with deep learning and machine learning that are running globally, their forecast accuracy has to be extremely high. So here again, machine learning models, Arise is being used for observability, single platform that's doing all of these. A couple other examples. This one is chatting with data. It's called AI for BI within Pepsi. What you're seeing here is an agent that takes a question, and the question could be, how much is the net revenue in P1 in Paris? Now, a couple things are happening here. Because Shobit is assigned to the Texas territory, Paris here means Paris, Texas, not Paris in France. And P1 is a particular period that we talk about within Pepsi. So the FNA, FP&A processes will tell us what that means. So you obviously get the answer. But then there are also other reports that have already been created for deeper dives. You want to link to those too. So in doing so, you're taking an overall ask and you're splitting up into smaller tasks, and you want to observe if we are understanding the question correctly and is the answer accurate or not. Here again, we're using all the spans to go look for traces within Arise platform. And the last example was where we started with the gate rate video. The images that are being created, we mentioned earlier that it has to be multiple layers of filtering before we can allow these to be printed. Nachi, can you help us talk through how you're thinking about principles of responsibility, and then we'll close with some lessons learned.
Perfect. No, so I think we were saying earlier is for every use case, one, we have to do the risk assessment upfront. So this is where the responsible AI framework comes in, which is to say that every use case that we apply AI with, not just generative AI, all kinds of AI, is going through a risk assessment upfront, which is where the responsible AI policy comes in. So there's a company-wide policy now which says, here's how we will use AI responsibly. And there is governance meetings now for every use case that goes through. There's upfront risk assessment, which is cross-functional. And then, of course, how that gets linked into is the execution of those policies is through PepVigil that we were talking earlier. So now it's a closed-loop system, as we are saying, is that, hey, now we have defined our policy. We have defined ways to risk assess upfront. But then we have ability to execute that policy as well through PepVigil because we set up our guidelines and policies over there. So now we are able to do that full loop for things that we are developing in-house. So this is really important for the company, and then everything that goes through is, of course, you can read it on the slide, follows NIST approach and so on and so forth. So again, we can talk a ton, but this is something that's key.
And just wrapping up, Nachi, and thanks again for the partnership. There's a lot we've learned in the last couple of years trying to put these into production. How are you thinking through multi-agents coming in from different vendors?
So I think for many enterprises like us, this will be a key issue that every system of record that we use today, Salesforce, SAP, ServiceNow, everyone's going to come out with agents. So it won't be about observing agents that we build, but it's also about agents that come out of these box, but also agents that we might purchase for certain domain experience. How do you orchestrate all of them and observe across them as a single pane of glass is going to be critical for us.
And I think as you're managing these agents, there's a very direct connection to the ROI. Because now the business decisions are moving, the pendulum is moving towards the business making the call on which AI partner they pick because of the workforce they're in. And then the onus falls on the central team to make sure that the evals are aligning with the business value. And you can have a feedback mechanism that goes through it, right? Can you just wrap us up with the importance of having a single pane of glass on everything that you're held accountable for managing?
Absolutely. I think, as we were saying earlier, we really wanted a single pane of glass because in our business flows, it's not that everything is an agent. Some could be just traditional forecasting models. Some could be traditional segmenting models. For us to have a single pane of glass to observe across that business flow would be super critical. And that's why it's saying, when we say PepVigil, it's really our one single pane of glass across all of AI that's being built within PepsiCo or being purchased or coming out of the box of these systems or records that we're using. So that's where it's super critical for us to have one single pane of glass.
And I feel very proud that AI has been an equal opportunity enabler within PepsiCo. And I see that firsthand. Different departments have access to trusted AI from a central platform. And as long as they're leveraging that platform, it's a very fast time to market for you. And I think that gives you a very unfair competitive advantage over some of your peers. So congratulations again on pulling off such an amazing platform. And it's been a pleasure partnering with you. Any last words before we wrap up?
No, I think really thanks for giving us the opportunity to come and speak of what we're doing. But again, this is just the starting of a journey that we are on. So we'd love to learn from all of you and how you're using AI and observability on top of that. So thanks again. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shobhit. Thank you.